Greetings, believers and non-believers, and Sablechicken. This is Rabbit 8. Now, this video is a response to a response to a response to a response to my Help Me in My Unbelief video. So if you haven't been keeping up, sorry. And it's cold, so I'm going to put a jacket on. Now, I'll give kind of a brief synopsis, I guess, and also elucidate on my change in tactics as of late. Now, I've had a lot of people giving me a hard time, saying, Sablechicken isn't reasonable, she's never going to listen to you, yada, yada, yada. And, I understand that may or may not be true, and, for this video, and pretty much any video that I do, I'm always keeping in mind the people that are watching. Pretty much any video I make, any exchange I have in the public forum, it's just as much for the people that are watching as it is for the person I'm engaging with. And, videos that are full of insults and mudslinging are a dime a dozen around here. And all things considered, I think it's better to at least have, one voice that, even if the conclusions are obvious for most people and the fact that it needs to be pointed out leads one to be angry and frustrated, I don't mind being the guy that's very calm and clear and just lays it all out there, gives that little extra nudge for the people that need just a little help to put two and two together, So, Sablechicken, the video of yours that I'm responding to, your description was just, what's the question again? So let me just ask you one more time. This is basically the original question that my Help Me in My Unbelief video was meant to ask, and I had to frame it in that way to get people to take the question seriously. And if you see the video, you'll know what I'm talking about. But basically, I see so many times where, and not to generalize, but in general, a lot of believers think that a non-believer such as myself chooses not to believe in proposition X, Y, or Z. Okay, so Sablechicken, if you're only going to answer or address one thing I say, the original question that started this whole exchange was, what do you tell someone like myself who understands the logical proposition that those who do not accept Jesus Christ as their Savior will be doomed to an eternity in hell? What do you tell someone who understands the proposition but just cannot make themselves believe it? That's it. And in the peripheral there, kind of the other questions that are hanging out and kind of related to that are, would the Creator condemn for an eternity someone that He created simply because that creation could not make themselves believe in proposition X, Y, or Z? Now, I've had some interesting answers from some Christians, and one of these days I'm going to put them all together into a video, because it's not a loaded question. I'm not answering it, or I'm not asking it just to watch you squirm or anything like that. I do want to hear the answers, and the answers I've gotten have been interesting, and I want to share them. But thus far, it seems like you've basically dodged the question. So again, if you're only going to answer one thing, what do you tell someone that understands the consequences of non-belief, but still can't make themselves believe? Just academically, theoretically, answer. Just, what would you say? And that also kind of brings up what someone like me would want to hear is, if, granted, I understand that the claim is you don't go to hell for not believing, you go to hell because of your sin, and no sin can enter heaven and all that stuff. But ultimately, if you look at the whole situation, at the end of the day, the difference between heaven or hell is this Jesus belief, this acceptance of Jesus as your Savior. Especially when because I know that the claim is that all humans are sinful. There's no such thing as a person that's born without sin is incapable of sinning. So by that definition, all humans are incapable of entering heaven. So really it is the criteria, as far as I can tell from what I hear from most people, is the belief in Jesus. So if God put this system in place, he can look at it just like I can and go, okay, you accept Jesus, you don't. You're in, you're out. And it's that simple. So what the other questions that I can't help but ask are, what is it about faith? What is it about the act of believing in itself that would be so endearing to the omnipotent creator of the universe? I think it's just as plausible that it would value compassion or honest skepticism, genuine curiosity, a desire to really know, the creation, if that's what it is. And one other thing that you're just going to have to keep in mind, and again, I'm not trying to make this more complicated than it needs to be, but I've got a feeling that a lot of your answers are going to tie into this. So when you say that, I assume that you think the Bible is more than just another book like Lord of the Rings or Catcher in the Rye, or even more than just a history book, even though I don't even like to think the history in the Bible is really, really shaky. And I'm willing to discuss all this, but the other thing that you've got to keep in mind when you try to answer anything is, I don't see a reason to think that the Bible is more than just another book. And so if you keep that in mind, again, that's all I can say is, dwell on that. Think about your answers before you give them to me, because, again, I'm not choosing this. I have no choice but to come to the conclusion that the Bible is not the product of omniscience. So quoting the Bible in and of itself isn't going to convince me about the truth value of proposition X, Y, or Z. I can understand that if the Bible is true, then we'll take it from there. But yeah, so this is a big can of worms. I know this is a big order here, and again, this isn't just for Sablechicken. This goes out for everyone. If you really unpack this whole salvation thing, it's a pretty big, long, complicated issue. I understand, for a lot of non-believers like myself, it seems really simple, but I'm trying to really reach out, and hopefully, those of us across the divide can maybe come to some mutual understanding, and I hope that whatever the truth is, whatever is ultimately real and valid, either Jesus was born of a virgin or he was not. Either he is the sole savior of mankind and the only entrance into the kingdom of heaven, or he is not. I have no desire to mislead myself or others, but everything I've seen thus far indicates that this whole, I hate to use this word because, again, I'm trying to stay away from labels and things in general, but this whole concept of a religion, it's like a big house of cards, and it's built on the shakiest of foundations, and all I've got to do is cast my glance towards it, and the whole thing crumbles. And I can't help but wonder, what is it, when, again, I'm assuming that no one wants to be lying to themselves. Can you show me why should I believe any of this stuff? Please. I want to know the truth. So if you've got the truth, explain it to me.
When I was in your situation, but I can appreciate the universe and the complexity of life, and but how can we really completely appreciate that if we don't understand the designer?
Okay, two things, and forgive me if I assume too much. First, a request, and I've basically said this before, but once again, please extend to me the courtesy of taking me seriously when I say that I have read the Bible and I've not all of it, a lot of it. I've read a lot. I've read the Gospels. I've read, the Genesis, and then some. I haven't sat down and read the whole thing yet, but I almost think it's safe to assume I've read the Bible more than a lot of Christians have. And you spend enough time on YouTube, you can see a lot of atheists really know their Bible. But so please extend to me the courtesy of taking me seriously when I say I've read your book and I've tried to understand it. I unfortunately have a very hard time extending you the courtesy of taking you seriously when you say you've tried to put yourself in my position and really understand and appreciate the universe. Now, I can philosophically understand your concept of, wouldn't we want to get to understand the designer better? Wouldn't we want to know the designer? But, pardon me if I'm wrong, but according to, now maybe I haven't heard this from you directly, forgive me if you don't ascribe to this position, but seems almost by definition God is this unknowable, unfathomable, infinite thing to us. So when you say, trying to understand it, that almost sounds nonsensical to me. So I from the perspective I'm coming from, the best that any of us can do, if you did want to try to understand the designer, is just to look at the stuff that he designed. And again, pardon me, forgive me if this comes across as callous, but I really can't believe you when you say you've tried to appreciate the universe as much as I have. Just to give you a taste, okay? This isn't even all the books, okay? This is just a handful of stuff I've read in the past year or two. These are just the ones. Actually, I don't own all of these, so yeah, I've still got some borrowed books here. I exchange books with a lot of friends, but it's a big, complicated universe out there. If you want to understand it, okay, none of us are ever going to understand all of it. That's there's only so much room in our brain here. But I've got now, and again, Sablechicken, I don't expect you to read all of these. I would be amazed and grateful and very, I dare say, proud, even if you were to read, even one or two or three of these. But I just going through my bookshelf, I found a really good, just kind of a general outline, just a way to get a feel for the universe and how complicated and how beautiful it really is. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but I dare say you haven't touched any of these. So we have, let's see, actually, let me kind of go in order here. Let's see. So if you want to understand the universe in general, just kind of in the aggregate, I cannot recommend a book more highly than Big Bang by Simon Singh. This is what I really like about this book. This is basically my primary reference and inspiration for that vaporware Big Bang project that I'm working on. But basically, this guy starts you off in the very beginning of human astronomy. And in science, especially in astronomy, or maybe not especially, but in a lot of science in general, coming from a layperson's perspective, to really appreciate what we have learned, it's not, or what's equally as important is, it's not so much what we know, but how we know it. And when you understand how we know this stuff, it makes it all that much more convincing. So yeah, the Big Bang walks through the very beginnings of human astronomy and goes through how our conception of the universe has changed over time, why the Big Bang Theory was proposed in the first place, what were the alternative theories against it, that disagreed with it, and why is it that the Big Bang Theory is almost universally accepted by scientists, astronomers, cosmologists, etc. It's important to keep in mind that science does not claim to be the ultimate definitive truth of anything, or to have the ultimate definitive truth of anything. The best we can do is build successively more accurate representations or models of reality. And the very nature of science is to always be self-skeptical and be ready to throw out your most dearest, deeply held conclusions if the data warrants it. So I think I've ranted enough about that. But so universe in general, Big Bang. Okay, also another essential, and it might not go down smooth the first time you read it, But A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. This is going to give you a pretty good overview of physics and cosmology. And again, it explains how we know a bunch of the stuff that we know, or how we have to ask the questions that we ask, what kind of answers we could expect. Now, as far as life goes, the only place we know it exists is on Earth. And if you want to understand life and the diversity of life, again, not the creation of life, not the beginning of life, nobody knows how life began. Anyone who says they do is lying. Now, there are a lot of good theories. There are physically possible, conceivable scenarios that can give, you can have non-life, non-living matter give rise to life. We don't know, though. We don't know. So, anyone that says they know is lying. But that's not what evolution deals with. Evolution explains how life has changed over time, how it has come to exist in all the different forms that we have today. And just two classics. These are just what I have on my bookshelf. But there's always Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. This was a lot more readable than I thought it would be. It's written in the 1850s, so it does come across as kind of dry sometimes, but it's a lot more clear and easy to digest than I thought it would be. And it's a pretty thick book. And the thing is, that a lot of you guys probably don't know this, but Charles Darwin arrived at the theory of natural selection, evolution by natural selection, in his own mind, long before this book was written. And even evolution itself had been suggested, but no one had come up with a scientifically verifiable, conceivable mechanism by which it would happen. And he had the concept in his brain, and he knew that it would be controversial and it would stir up a lot of controversy. So he spent a lot of time just gathering data, making sure he had all his facts straight, making sure he was on the right track. Even when he did publish it, he was reluctant to do so. The only reason he did was Wallace had basically shown that he was about to independently arrive at many of the same conclusions that Darwin did, which, again, it kind of lends credibility to the concept that these guys are on the right track. But, yeah, this is loaded with data. It's a lot easier to read than you might think. I might actually recommend reading this one first. This is The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins, and even though when I look back on my life, I've technically been an atheist. I have been without theistic belief for pretty much my whole life, and depending on how you want to slice it, I've never been a theist. But it was probably only 3 years ago or so that I read this book, and this more than anything else was what made me a naturalist or a scientist at heart. It's one thing to look at proposition X, Y, or Z and say, I don't know if that claim really holds water, but this book was kind of what started me on my path through reading a lot of the science kind of books that I've read now, and really opened my eyes to the capacity of science to explain what seemed like very complicated, improbable phenomenon and make it just seem obvious. And so if you're only going to read one thing on this whole list, I might recommend this right here. Maybe The Big Bang, I don't know. But The Selfish Gene, and you can't judge it by the title, okay? It's nice and catchy. Richard Dawkins is, I don't know if he said he regrets it or not, but really what this book is about, now it will explain a lot about how evolution works, and you'll learn a lot about that in the process, but really what this book seeks to explain is, if evolution is all about survival of the fittest, you would think it would favor the selection of selfish individuals. And the case that Dawkins makes in this book is basically it's not the fundamental unit of natural selection is not the organism, it's not the individual, but it's the actual gene. Your strand of DNA, it's a bunch of separate genes all together, and it's the genes that are fighting against each other. And that's just a figure of speech, and they don't have a conscience or anything like that. But by gene selfishness can give rise to altruism, being nice, basically, in individual organisms. So that's kind of what it seeks to explain. And another book Dawkins has written, because I want this to go down easy as much as possible, is Unweaving the Rainbow. And the kind of the concept of that is, don't be afraid of science. The fact that you can explain a rainbow in terms of, gravity-powered nuclear fusion happening in the sun, releasing photons which come down to the Earth, diffract through the atmosphere, go through drops of rain, which preferentially bend the light depending on the frequency, which causes a nice round pattern to emerge to you. You can understand a rainbow in that terms. That doesn't do anything to diminish the beauty of the rainbow itself. So keep that in mind. Even though this says a lot about how life has changed over time, it doesn't say anything about how we should act, and it doesn't make anything less beautiful. In fact, I'd say it's the exact opposite. The closest thing to a spiritual experience I've ever had, seriously, was when I read this book, and then I read this book, and it was the joy of knowing and true understanding. All right, so at this point we've got a general feel for the universe, right? And we've got a general feel for life on Earth. And now let's get a general feel for human history and human religion. Now, if you want to understand human history, okay, every history class I've ever taken, okay, starts with, just the very, very recent past. This is an example I got from Richard Dawkins. He probably stole it from someone else, so. Okay, and I'm probably butchering the specifics on here, but you can get the general idea. If you take the history of the Earth as beginning at the middle of my chest right here, time goes on, and January 3rd, 2008 is right here at the tip of my fingers, okay? The Earth is formed approximately 4.5 billion years ago. Life emerges pretty soon after. Most of this right here is all bacteria, okay? Then you start to get multicellular life and fish and such, and things crawl out of the water, and you get reptiles and mammals. And then if I take this nail file and go like this, I have just erased human history. All of human history that's been recorded so far, just gone. Okay, so you've got to keep that in mind. Our history is a very, very small piece of the grand scheme of things. And I am, of course, willing to discuss the merits of this claim, but my claim is that any understanding of human history needs to start with something like what you get in this book right here. This is Guns, Germs, and Steel. This book attempts to explain the broadest trends of recent human history. Still goes back a lot further than any class I've taken or any other book that I've read. And, it's about 13,000 years ago. So you got about 13,000 years of human history in a broad outline in these pages right here. And that's a good place to start. All right, you still there? Okay, cool. So, and then the very last one in my list here. Okay, so we've gone from the universe to life to human history. And then if you want to understand human religion as a natural phenomenon, because it is, it's something that happens in the natural world. Presumably there are facts and data available to us that we can make analyses about. And if you want to understand religion as a natural phenomenon, I recommend Breaking the Spell by Daniel Dennett, subtitled Religion as a Natural Phenomenon. Again, this is one of those books where it's easy to read too much or misinterpret the title and judge the work by title alone. So when Daniel Dennett says breaking the spell, keep in mind the main thing he's talking about, what he wants to do with that book is break the spell of the reluctance to look at religion as a natural phenomenon, and just to assume that it's this thing that's passed down to us. Because if there are different religions in the world and such, there's data about it. So that's all that book says. He wants to break the spell of the reluctance to look at religion objectively and to study it like you would study anything else. And what this book does, and this again was such an eye-opener, it tries to explain the physical, the mundane causes, if you will, of religion forming in the first place, and how it would change and adapt as time goes on. So, that I hope I've given you a. That's just, again, a very brief outline. Someone could equally pick 6 other books that could probably accomplish the same goal. But if you wanna step into my shoes as someone who loves the universe and strives to understand it, you gotta at least, try to ask the people that know. It's, again, science doesn't claim to know the ultimate truth of anything, but to the extent that the facts can be gleaned from the environment, science is the method that gets us there. And if you disagree with that, I've got to ask you, how exactly is it that you think, you turn your computer on to watch this video, that camera that captures your image and your sound and reproduces it faithfully for all of us to see out here, that's the product of science. So whether we admit it or not, all of us take science seriously, and all that science does is try to explain to us the best, again, the successively more accurate model or interpretation of the real physical world. And if you have to believe, to get through your day, that there is a God that created the universe that's looking out for you, I don't know about the looking out for you part, but if there's a God that created a universe, science is how we understand what it is that he created, how he created it. And if I believed that I was the product of a designer who built the entire universe and had me in mind from the very beginning, I would really, really, really be hungry to know how it is that he executed such a thing. And so one other little bit I want to leave you with. This isn't directly addressed to Sablechicken. In fact, Sablechicken, if you're still watching, leave me a comment. Just say, hey, I got to the comment, and include the number 42. I'll definitely know you saw it. Just include the number 42. Seriously, that'll be my verification. But for everyone else, something that I've kind of thought about a lot. I go around, I call myself an atheist, and I've talked a little bit about recently why I'm not necessarily going to be flaunting that term anymore, but I'll answer to it, because I'm without theistic belief. But ultimately, all I'm doing is I'm trying to make the best. All I'm trying to do is come to the best conclusions I can about reality, and obviously, none of us can rule out the possibility that an omniscient, omnipotent creator exists. I'll leave out omnibenevolent just for the sake of argument there. Now, one thing, I've had some people ask me, how do you feel about deism? And deism as opposed to theism or atheism. Like a deist God, if you don't know this already, basically, correct me if I'm wrong, a deist God would be one that puts the universe in place, has his plan for how it's all going to work, but it's kind of like a computer programmer who writes his program, but knows exactly how it's going to run before he presses the execute button. All he has to do is write it, execute the program, walk away, and it's going to take care of itself. As opposed to a theistic God, a theistic God which intervenes in the universe, answers prayers, things like that. Now, one proposition I want to make, and yeah, if you've got to the end of this video, I know you're a true fan, right? But I'm kind of the opinion that, correct me if I'm wrong, but a deistic universe would be indistinguishable from an atheist universe, right? Because if what's the difference between a creator that doesn't interact with the creation at all, one that doesn't interact, and then one that doesn't exist. And you could say, well, it would be his design, or it would be included in there, but, if he doesn't interact, I can't think of I can't think of a test you could do that would be able to distinguish, and if it's indistinguishable, then just keep that in mind before you claim the certainty of proposition X, Y, or Z. Rabbit Ape out.